you moved to our school, and for whatever reason, everybody at Oak Park only said their height in inches. And you're like, no, here we say feet and inches. You're going to have to change. And you're like, well, how do I do that? I'm 62 inches tall. How do I say, if some of you might know the answer already, is 5'2"? How do we go about mathematically finding that out? Well, first of all, we know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. For those of you that like the actual symbols, the inch symbol is 2 little slashes. The foot symbol is 1 little slash. You know that there are 12 inches in a foot. So if we want to figure out how do we convert 62 inches to feet? Well, you could count how many 12 inches. 12 inches, 24, 36, 48, skip count, 60. And you'd be like, 5 feet is 60 inches. So if you did it that way, you could then say, well, then 62 inches is 5 feet and 2 inches. That's one way we could go about solving this. Okay? The problem with skip counting is, let's say, this is non-realistic, but someone from Oak Park comes here and they say, yeah, how tall are you? And they say, I'm 382 inches tall. Okay, this is unrealistic. But the problem with skip counting to 382 inches is it takes a long time. So method number 2 for this, you could take 62 inches and divide by 12. And if you do this as a decimal, this becomes, ooh, mental math here. Is that 5.1? Someone have a calculator? Is that right? Yes? Okay, good. You get 5.16 repeated. I did mental math. My mental math skills are sometimes a little crazy. Sometimes. Do you want to know how I did it? I did 62 divided by 12. I knew it would be 5 and 2/12. 2/12 is the same as 1/6, and I happen to have 1/6 memorized to be 1.6 repeated. I also know 1/5, 1/7, 1/8, 1/9. I have all those as decimals for whatever reason. I just know them in my head. So then I was able to change the 1/6 to 0.16 repeated, and that's how I did the mental math. But anyways, if you do the direct conversion, which says, okay, I use the strategy saying if I had 62 inches and I wanted to convert to feet, I should need less of them. If I need less of them, should I multiply or should I divide? I should divide. Okay? Remember, you could also do your conversion using the fractions. So if you're ever confused which way you want to do a conversion and you wanted to convert 62 inches to feet, you could use the fraction and say x feet over 62 inches has to equal, because if these are equal, this fraction's equal to 1. How do I make my other fraction equal to 1? 1 foot is 12 inches. And then from here, I multiply both sides by 62. On this side, I'd have 62 divided by 12, which gives me the same answer. So sometimes it's nice to have, like, okay, I'm stuck. The fraction method should be what you always go to when you're stuck, because it'll always work for you, setting things up as a ratio. Okay? Some of you be like, setting things up as a ratio always takes a little bit more time, so I like to see, okay, I know I should have less of them, so I'm going to divide. I know I should have more, I'm going to multiply. Okay? Anyways, we converted 62 inches, so 62 inches is equal to 5.16 feet. What that decimal means is we have 5 full feet and then a bit left extra. How do we figure out what that bit left extra is? If you did this method, I would then say, well, 5 full feet times 12 is equal to 60 inches. And then if I had 62, that leaves me with 2 left over. So my answer becomes 5 feet, 2 inches. What you have to decide is what makes the most sense for you. How would I change 62 inches to feet and inches? Did I like to get the 60 just by skip counting? Okay? And then I could change it after. Or do you like this method where you find out, convert it to feet? Because this number will always tell you the full amount. How tall did I say that kid moved here with? 382? Okay? So if I did 382 divided by 12, how tall is this kid? 31 feet tall. And some. 31 times 12 gets me to 372. They were 382, an extra 10. So they would be 31 foot 10. I don't even know if you'd want them on the basketball team because they'd have to duck for the roof. And then they'd have to bend over every time to put the basketball in. It would probably be like one step to get all the way down to the other side of the court. Oh. Crazy. Okay. For this one, we're starting off with inches. And we want to write it as a certain amount of yards, a certain amount of feet, and a certain amount of inches. What do we know? We know that 1 yard is 36 inches. We know that 1 foot is 12 inches. So again, there's more than one right way to go about this. What I'm going to show you is I'm going to start with the yards. Is 92 bigger than 36? Yeah. Yes. So we for sure have 1 yard. Can you see that 2 yards would be 72? Yeah. 3 yards would be 108. So when we have 92, we don't have 3 yards, but we for sure have 2. I can write this underneath. 2 yards is 72 inches. So if I put a 2 in here, I would have that 92 inches is 2 yards with 20 inches left. Does that make sense? Okay. Does that finish filling this out? Should I just put a 20 in here? No, because do I have full feet? Every 12 inches is a full foot. So 1 foot is 12. 2 feet would be 24. 24, I don't have 24. But I do have 1 foot. So 20 inches is 1 foot, which is 12 inches. And how much left? Careful. And 8 inches left. So then I can put 1 foot in here and 8 inches left. Notice I couldn't get the whole answer right away. I had to find something out first, and I wrote that out, 2 yards with 20 inches left, and then I could go from there and do the next step. Okay? Sometimes in math, one of the biggest hurdles that we have as students is we try to solve things right away in one step. And sometimes it's not possible. Okay? Sometimes you have to do a little bit first before you can do the next step. And for students that try to do it in one step and they can't do it in one step, they just go, oh, I can't do it. Well, no, break it down. What can you figure out? How can you do a bit of it? And if you can do a bit of it, how does that help you? Awesome. This is one way. I started with the big one, okay? Sometimes students start the other way. 92 inches tall. Whew. How tall would that be? 8 foot. 8 foot 8? 7 foot 8? 8 foot. No, 7 foot 8. 7 foot 8. So some people would start with this, and they would start with 7 foot 8. And then they would use 1 yard is 3 feet. Can you see if I did the 7 foot 8 first? Then I take my 7 and say, oh, every 3 makes a yard, so 7 would be 2 yards. I'd have 1 foot left. You could work that way as well. Okay, so some options. What you have to, all the options sort of use the same idea. You have to figure out what idea makes the most sense for you working forward. If an idea makes sense for you, you'll be able to do it outside of class when you need to. If you're just copying a method that I teach you and just like, I have to memorize this method, you will forget that when you need to use it outside of class, and it won't be helpful for you. Okay? I want the math that we learn here not to only help you get a good math grade and be able to go on to grade 11 pre-calculus or grade 11 applied and do well. Obviously, I want that. But I also want you to be able to use that in your everyday life when you're figuring out things. Okay. Perimeter. You know, a perimeter is the distance around something. Okay? So Ben is doing the baseboards, which is the wood or whatever material that goes along the bottom. In this class, the baseboard is a little rubber thing. That would be the baseboard. Okay? You're building a room, you put a baseboard on because between the wall and the floor, usually it's not perfectly lined up nicely, so the baseboard sort of hides all imperfections behind it. He measured around the edge, and it came to 37 feet. And so first of all, it's asking us what length of baseboard is needed if we changed it to yards and feet. So we can start by writing this out. 37 feet equals something yards, something feet. What do we know? That 3 feet equals 1 yard. And here's where mental math could come into play. Some of you are very good at mental math skills. How many full sets of yards fit into 37? 12. Right? Because 12 times 3 is 36. 13 times 3 is 39. That's too much. So sometimes you can just do this with mental math and figure out this has to be 12. If we write that out, 12 yards is 36 feet. So 37 feet is 12 yards. And how many feet are left over? And 1 foot left over. That figures out this part. Question? You may. If the number wasn't one that your mental math helped you, okay? Like if you're like, okay, I can do 3 times 12 and get 36, but Mr. JR, if you put 377 up there, not so good for me. So what is the other method that we looked at? You could take 37 and you could divide it by 3 on your calculator. your calculator will tell you 12.3 repeated. The 12 tells you that this has to be 12. The 0.3 doesn't tell you that that's 1 right away. But if you got 12.3, you could then say, I know that 12 full yards times 3 is equal to 36. Then that lets me know there was 1 foot left over. Okay? You'll notice, though, that by writing out, like this lines that I wrote out, 12 yards is 36 feet. So 37 feet is 12 yards and 1 foot left over. That can help you see what the conversion would be. So at this place where you were buying them, they're saying that baseboards are sold by the yard for $5.99 per yard. How much would you have to pay to buy this? Have you ever either yourself or done any kind of construction projects with your parents? Okay? When you go to the store, right? We found out here when we divided, let's just go back a second, we found out that we need 12.3 yards. Would they let you buy the 0.3 at the store? No. You have to buy full boards. Okay? Most of the boards that are in Canadian lumber stores come in 8 feet long. But in this one, they're saying they come in sections that are 1 yard long. So you would need to buy how many? You would need to buy 13 yards. And it doesn't just round down. Rounding down doesn't exist in construction, right? I'm going to paint my room. I calculated I need 1.2 cans of paint. Well, I'll round down and buy 1. That doesn't work so well because part of your room doesn't get painted. So you always have to round up when you're buying materials. Then what is the cost? 13 times by $5.99, $77.87. And that's before taxes. What are taxes in Manitoba right now? 13? 5% GST and 7% PST, so 12%. So you would have to pay an extra 12% on this. This kind of idea where you have to buy 13 yards, you have to buy more, this unit is probably, because this year tends to go applied and pre-calculus, this would be considered a little bit more of an applied unit than a pre-calculus unit for that reason. Okay? All of this stuff you still need, like conversions and doing all the fraction stuff and the math, that's still very much in pre-calculus as well. Here's one for you to try on your own. And again, while we're doing the notes, if you can be ahead of me, if you like, oh, I think I can get this one on my own, then you don't have to wait for me to do it. Once you've got an answer, check with the person next to you, see if they got a similar answer. Okay. My method is I knew that 1 yard was 36 inches. So the first thing I did was I figured out that 4 yards was equal to 144 inches. I then took 144 and divided it because every 8 makes a bracelet. So 144 divided by 8 works out perfectly to 80. Sometimes our conversions get a little crazy. One thing that is a conversion thing is a scale on a map. It is very rare that you get a map that is drawn to scale. Can you imagine if you had a map drawn to scale from here to Portage la Prairie? Your map would be, I don't know, 80 kilometers long. You're like, where am I? You have to flip pages forever. Your book would be super thick. It doesn't make sense to have a map that is a scale of 1 to 1. So most of the time, okay, all of the time, your map is smaller than reality. It would also not be a very good idea to make your map bigger than what it actually is. Okay? So they give you a scale. And the scale on this map is 1, and then those 2 dots, to 4.75 million. What does that mean? This allows you, in a scale like this, if there are no units given, and this one has no units given, that means that the units are the same. So if you chose centimeters, 1 centimeter on the map is 4.75 million centimeters in reality. 1 inch on the map is 4.75 million inches in reality. Sometimes scales have units, and often maps will have that, because if this scale says 1 centimeter is equal to 4.7 or 475,000 centimeters, it might be a better way to change it. So 1 centimeter, there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So if I take off 2 zeros, that would change it to meters. If I take off another 3, that would change it to kilometers. So in this situation, you will sometimes see maps that have units because it lets you switch. It's not very easy in your head to imagine how far is 4,750,000 centimeters. You probably have nowhere in your life that someone has said, oh, finally we've traveled 1,000,000 centimeters. But you've probably gone somewhere where you've traveled 40, 50 kilometers. So you have that as a reference point. So sometimes scales try to use reference points that you understand better. But this one has no units, so whatever units you choose is what's given. Now, the distance between Seward and the Anchorage and Anchorage is 1 3/4 inches. So if 1 inch is, this is your scale, then you need to find out what 1 3/4 inches is. Should you have more or less than you had to begin with? Right? Should it be bigger than this number or smaller? If 1 inch is this, 1 3/4 inches should be bigger, right? Because you have more. Okay? So if it's bigger, and I'm using that strategy, then I'm going to multiply by 1 3/4. 1 3/4 doesn't go nicely in my calculator. What did I type in my calculator instead? 1.75. Okay? So there I used the shortcut. I multiplied because I knew I need to get more. If You were like, I don't know if I should multiply or not. Well, then set up your fraction. Your fraction says, I want to find out x, and it needs to be equal to 1.75 inches. What was I given? I was given that 1 inch on the map. Maybe I'll put map in brackets here because I would have to put map in brackets there. And in reality, it was 4750000. How would I get x by itself? Well, I'm dividing by 1.75. The opposite would be multiplying by 1.75 on both sides. That's a really pretty multiply sign. And then that would give me this answer as well. So what have we found out? We have found out so far the distance is 8,312,500 inches. We need to change that to miles. So we go to our formula sheet, which I just happen to not have in front of me, and we look, is there something on here that changes miles to inches? No. What is the only thing that miles gets changed to on our yards and feet? So we can choose one of them. We know that 1 mile, is this the right number? 5,280? 1 mile is 5,280. So, how would we use that to be able to help us? We also know that 1 foot is 12 inches. I could take this and figure out how many feet I have. Should we have less than that number or more than that number when we're changing? We should have less. So I'm going to take 8,312,500 and divide it by 12. And I can write out that 8,312,500 inches is 692,708.3 repeated feet. Include my units. And then I can divide that. I should have less miles. So I'm going to take that answer. And the nice thing on most of your calculators is once you have an answer, if you just hit, oh, I want to divide, hit divide next, it takes the answer that you had and divides it. So you don't have to retype in this. I have that number already. I'm going to divide by 5280. And I get, which is 131.19. Says, yeah, miles is about. Because I rounded, I'm going to add the word about because it's not exact. Is about 131 miles.